Yes, team. Welcome to another episode of the Total Mental Performance Podcast. Today we have a special guest who I've been looking forward to speaking to for, if we actually look at the dates, about nearly 5 months now. It's Alec Kassin. Alec is a former semi-professional cyclist. He's a pain management coach, and he's a founder or the founder of the Pain Free Comeback. So it's the first brain-focused recovery program for athletes with chronic pain. And I met Alec at a mastermind back in January, and when he told me about what he does and how it works, I was like, wow. I'm completely fascinated. Obviously, with a company called Total Mental Performance, we work a lot around the mind. We look a lot into the brain and how it works and how we can think, feel, and perform on another level. And as an athlete that was chronically in pain, as soon as he said what he did, I was like, this is the guy I needed back when I was training full time, 3 times a day, 5 days a week, breaking onto the England team and trying to fight around the world. Like, this was the man I needed. I know he can help so many of you, so many of our audiences um, are athletes, and whether that's amateur, semi-professional, professional. I know there's going to be a hell of a lot of value to be shared with the audience. So, Alec, mate, it's so good to have you on the podcast, and thank you for coming on to share your wisdom.
Kieran, likewise. I've been looking forward to this for an equally long time and really excited to see where we go. I'll share just one thing as well. Pain management is not necessarily what I do. It's a common thing in this world of you need to manage pain. I say that I'm a pain elimination coach. So,
Mm.
and we'll get into why that's the case as well.
Well, language is everything, right? Who wants to chronically manage when you can eliminate? Like, that's
Exactly.
a no-brainer. So amazing. Well, look, why don't you shared your story at the mastermind we met at. Why don't you share a little bit about what you do and how? In fact, let's go right back to the beginning. Semi-professional cyclist. Like, how did your story with pain start?
Yeah. So I'll get into how I got into this work, which was, I think, for a lot of us, it's by happenstance. But when I was 18 years old, I was racing semi-professionally on road racing. I had held a professional mountain bike license, and I was on one of the top junior development teams in the U.S. My former teammates have gone on to be national champions, even world champions and Olympians. And my life revolved around cycling. I was obsessed. It was what I was going to college at the time, but cycling was my life. And I would, to give you a sense of how kind of obsessed I was, before every single race, I'd take a Q-tip and I would clean every bike link in my chain before each
Mm.
race. I was obsessed with, sleep and recovery and everything. And I had just been bumped up into a new category when I was 18. It was the summer of 2011. And I was going to be racing against bona fide professionals for the first time. And I was due to do a race that Lance Armstrong had won 2 years prior in his run up to the Tour de France. And I was out on this training ride just 9 days before that event. And all of a sudden, I was just riding along local hill, and I felt this crippling pain in my lower back. It was like a lightning rod being slammed into my low back, and it was so bad that I couldn't sit on my bike seat. And I was like, what the heck? I didn't crash. I didn't have some sort of injury. Didn't get hit by a car or anything like that. But it was just this massive pain that came out of nowhere. And saw a chiropractor who said, 2 weeks, you're going to be back on top. I was like, great, fine. And then 2 weeks goes by and I'm still in pain. Then 4 weeks, then 6 weeks, and 8 weeks. And I'm just getting worse and worse and worse. And I think that's something that a lot of athletes can relate to. It's like, you have this pain or this injury, it's supposed to go away. And yet, for me, it wasn't. And I watched my entire season go down the drain. And what happened eventually is after about 5 months of starting to have constant pain, it wasn't just on the bike, but it was literally taking over my entire life. Pain when I sat down, pain when I woke up in the morning, and pain until I went to bed. I finally got an MRI, and I was diagnosed with a ruptured L4, L5 spinal disc and a torn herniated L5, S1. And my spinal doctor was like, pretty sure this is the cause of your pain. And said, generally, like, you're young, you should make a recovery, but he was talking about years and not months. And I was devastated.
Dude, there's so much of what you said there really I personally resonate with. Sounds like there was an OCD level of preparation, cleaning every chain link of your
Mm-hmm.
bike. I can imagine the study into nutrition, sleep, and performance, and the obsessive nature that would have went into that. I experienced the same thing. It was just like anything that can give you a 0.1% edge, you go in.
Bingo.
As I reflect, I kind of think, imagine if you just relaxed a bit more, man. Like, imagine if you were just a bit more chill.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
yeah, how much easier would our careers have
Yeah.
been if you'd just been just relax, dude. Don't take it so seriously, you know.
Yeah. I feel the same way. There was I remember my coach at the time. I was thinking of making an upgrade to my bike, and it was like we're talking about just like a couple grams, and he's like he held in his hand, he got 3 paper clips, and he's like, Alec, this is the difference. Like 3 paper clips is what you're talking about. Is this investment in your bike worth 3 paper clips? And I was like, duh. Of
Yeah,
course it is.
yeah. No brainer, of course.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I wish I could go back and tell myself a lot of the things that you just said.
Mm. And
Um,
do you think it was that psychological makeup that is what led to that pain? Because um, I would imagine you were very tense. I would imagine you were very strict. I would imagine when you were trying to recover, you're not really recovering because there's a level of intensity, and you've got a beautiful level of intensity now. You've got it in control. But I can imagine a younger version of you that raw energy and fire and passion was probably keeping you so tense, and you're probably under recovered. Do you think it was that mindset and your upbringing, whatever happened in that led
yeah,
to the chronic pain and your back going?
absolutely, and perhaps not in the way that you would expect. So, what I'll share more about the story, and then I want to come back to that point that you just made because
Mhm.
it's a key one. Um, so on this journey, I've been diagnosed with a ruptured spinal disc, and I got a series of I'm seeing everybody: physical therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, energy healers,
Mhm.
anybody, right at
Mm.
this point. And I got a series of nerve root injections where they basically just stick a giant needle into your spine, and then they pump you in with steroids in order to quell whatever inflammation is in your spine. And I remember after the second one of those, my pain, like, it got better for like 2 days, and then it became worse than ever.
Oh.
And it was at that point that I decided I had to withdraw from college. I was partially bedridden at home on opioids, had suicidal thoughts. I was depressed, and it was like my life had been ripped away from me. And I think when it comes to injuries when you're an athlete, I think it's a double whammy because it's not just impacting your daily life and what you're able to do, but it's about your identity as well. And so my identity being ripped away from me as a cyclist, as somebody who put his whole self-worth into cycling and got his self-worth from those achievements, that was as bad as the pain itself. So to your point of, was it that stress, that tenseness that you were putting yourself under that caused this? Like, absolutely. The fact that I was so tied to my identity as a cyclist, and that's essentially what I was doing to make myself feel that I was okay. And that
Mm.
creates it can create high highs, and it can create very low lows.
It
And
can
the
destroy
funny
you.
thing is, and destroy you, exactly. And here's the thing that will become clearer as we go through this. My brain as so my brain essentially created those symptoms in order to protect me. And it sounds insane.
No,
It's
it
like,
doesn't.
okay, Alec, you have a
In
ruptured
my world,
spinal
it
disc.
makes sense. But yeah, to anybody
Okay.
else that's listening, it sounds crazy. But yeah, it makes
Yeah.
total sense.
And the reason was, honestly, I say all these things about being on this development team and race that Lance Armstrong won 2 years prior. I wasn't that good compared to the people that I was racing against. I was never going to be in the Tour de France or a world champion like some of my teammates. And that I was pretending that I was good enough. There was this external veneer of, oh yeah, I can do this. Like, I'm strong, I'm tough. Inside, I grew up as a small, sensitive kid who was the youngest for his grade. That was all pretty much a show. And when I was going to be doing this race, this big semi-pro race, I was not going to do well. Like I was new to this category, new to racing against professionals. I was going to get my ass handed to me. And essentially my brain, my mind made this determination that it is better to have this excuse to have this pain
Mm.
than it is to go out there, give it your all, and see that you're actually not as good as you thought you were.
It makes total sense because your identity's so wrapped up in a black and white world of winning races, I'm enough. Not winning races, not enough. And often, I don't know about you, I used to win fights and I'd be picking apart my performance. And I'd have boxed pretty much
Yeah.
perfectly as I look at it now. But like at the time, it's like, oh, this was shit. This was shit. So yeah, it's a black and white existence, and sports is like that. It is black and white. You either win or you lose. It is
Yeah.
a finite game. You know, it has that in it. Whereas, and then the second point around your brain created pain to stop you from doing it. I had the same thing. Maybe that's what a lot of my injuries were. But as I speak it aloud, the connection I just made. But another part was an eating disorder. I had an eating disorder. I was trying to stay at 56 kilos on the England team.
Mm,
And you've seen my size in real life. Like I'm not a 56 kilo guy. It's the same height
yeah.
I am now. Um, and I realized that the eating disorder was my body's way. It was a mixture of things. It was a relationship with food growing up. It was the obsessiveness and the OCD of I've got to put every nutrient in my body and maintaining a weight that wasn't healthy. But I also
Yeah.
think part of it was my body's way of telling me like boxing's not for you. Like this isn't your dream. This isn't where you want to go. I
Yeah.
do think there's a talent thing too. Like at the elite levels, you can just see it. You can just feel it. Like there's no way to. A lot of people are just better than you. They're faster than you. They're quicker than you. They're more
Yeah.
intelligent than you with their body. But the point you made around like the body will tell you. The body knows. Like 100%, like 100%. So run me through from there. Then like can I'm like keep running with
Yeah.
the story. Where did it go after that?
So I'm at home. I'm 18. I'm 19 years old at this point. I'm partially bedridden, eating my meals standing up on painkillers, and I had been for not for a lack of trying. Right, I had seen all the practitioners, and there'd be this cycle that would happen of I would see a practitioner, like a physical therapist or a chiropractor, who'd say, "Oh yeah, this is what's wrong with you. We can like, don't worry, we'll fix you." And I was expecting them to fix me, right? Oh, if I just follow them to the letter,
Mm.
everything's going to be okay. And what would happen after a period of 2-3 months wasn't getting any better. And they'd be like, sorry, okay, well, we can keep doing this treatment. That's just managing things. And I'd be like, this isn't really working. And so after trying all of this stuff, I started to question, like, why on days when I would do the things that my doctors, my practitioner team told me to do, ice my back, don't sit too much, don't do too much physical activity, why could I have more pain on those days than on the days when I was doing the opposite, the things that they said not to do? What is going on here? And eventually I picked up, it was actually my mom who gave me a copy of this book called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. He was a professor of rehabilitation medicine at NYU. And he was famous in Western medicine for saying that chronic pain is actually generated by the brain or by repressed emotions. And
Mm.
I remember thinking the first time I heard about it, this is complete bullcrap. I've seen my MRI. I've seen my disc jutting out. I've seen my fluid leaking into my spine. There's no way that you can tell me that that is not causing my pain. And so first time I saw that, I was like, no. Then about a year later, I picked up the book again, and I saw myself on every single page. I saw the traits of people who are predisposed to chronic pain: perfectionism, people pleasing, low self esteem, achievement from external things, very stoic, holding in emotions. I saw how the stress that I was putting myself under, I was like a perfect personality type fit for this. And it started to click. It's like, oh yeah, well, on those days
Mm.
when my pain was, didn't make logical sense. Maybe some days it would be on my left side, then on my right side. I'd have sciatica on some days, other days not. This is really explaining that it's actually not something that is physical. but it's actually something that's in my brain. And that was a huge game changer for me.
Oh, it makes so much sense. Yeah. I mean, I never even thought about that connection. Like, I never even, you kind of just assume, oh, I'm broken and delicate, and all of my colleagues and on my team are much more solid, resilient, and
Hmm.
robust. And don't get me wrong, like blunt trauma is blunt trauma. Like there are
Yeah.
some things where you fracture your eye socket, or like that. That's not emotional. That is that. But chronic
Right.
pain is like, this was my next part, which I was really fascinated to ask you, is on a philosophical and existential level. Like I sit there when I'm in pain, and I observe it, and I ask, is this real? Like
Mm.
to the nth degree of where I'll be in the gym. And
Yeah.
I've been a very fearful lifter since I got into lifting after my boxing career, to try and like put some muscular imbalances in. It's like, is this pain real, or is this a perception? Is this just an idea? Like, what is my body trying to tell me? And then fear kicks in, and then I used to back off on my lift, and then it'd be like,
Yeah.
or I'd feel a little twinge in my back, and then I'm convinced myself my back's gone for like weeks, and like that, like
Yeah.
it, it's like the constant dance of, is this real or is this not real? So I'm curious,
Yes.
as somebody that is a specialist in this space, where do you sit? Is pain real? Is it not real? What is it? Like, please, I'm
Yeah.
curious.
So it's a great question. All pain is real, but not all pain is created equally. What I
Hmm.
mean by that is, you use the example of getting punched in the eye socket. That is a structural acute injury that, like, we're not talking about that when it comes to
Gotcha.
this. However, what can happen is, based on that fear and all those beliefs that you just shared about my body is weak, I have a bad back, maybe bad shoulders, whatever. Over time, a structural injury that has fully healed can become chronic. I've talked to so many people who say, I
Mm.
had this injury 5, 6, 10, 20, 30 years ago. I had a client who was in pain for 30 years due to an event that happened literally in the mid 90s. And he believed that that was still causing his pain. But what's really fascinating is, one, the fact that the human body has a incredible ability to heal. Like, you think
Mm.
about the biggest bone in the body, like the femur, like it takes 8 weeks for that thing to be fully healed and actually stronger than it was before. All injuries generally heal, but what can change is the brain as a result of the injury.
Mm.
So let's say you get punched in the eye socket, and we take a scan of your brain. There will be the parts of your brain that will light up are the ones that are associated with pain, with physical pain, right? Because it's like, hey, there's something wrong in this area. We don't want you to move your face in a certain way, and so you need to immobilize it. You need to heal. What happens after a period of about 3 months is that those parts of the brain that were lit up with structural pain, those die down. And then what gets illuminated, and you can see this on people's brain scans, which I find incredible, is that the brain regions that are associated with learning and memory are the ones that are associated with chronic pain. So, in other words,
It's
the
learned
same,
pain.
it's learned pain. It is conditioned.
Ah.
The same thing that allows you to be able to hop in a car and instinctively know how to drive without thinking about it is what is keeping your brain in pain.
Yeah. It's like when a boxer gets knocked out for the first time, particularly in the heavyweights, um, a lot of them are never the same again. It's like they had this really tough punch resistance within them, and they just had this belief, no one can knock me out, or I don't get knocked out, or whatever. And then they get knocked out once, and then a couple of things happen. Some of them back off, so then now they're like really
Mm.
timid because that I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah.
Or it's like their punch resistance disappears. And I've always wondered, well, the actual structural impact of maybe someone breaks their jaw, right? Or that doesn't
Mhm.
always happen for knockout. Sometimes it's just a big punch, and
Yeah.
yes, all of the nerve endings from the chin go down to the legs, and the legs give out, and the body flops to take the pressure off the head, and the head can only move in certain direction. But like
Yeah.
that's measured in the real world, right? So, but when that heals, there's a psychological scar that I think is happening So they might not even get hit as bad or as hard, but their legs will go, or their
Yeah.
bodies will go. So that's a learn. Always believed that to be a learned
Yeah.
response, and I guess it is the same with chronic pain. It's learned. This stimulus comes in. Anticipation, because that's a big part of addiction and a big part of eating disorders. What anticipate? Is it going to hurt? Is it going to? That's what I do. I do this all the time. Sometimes,
Yeah.
is it going to hurt? Is it going to hurt? And then you get a sensation which might not even be pain. It's just being worked. See, I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. It's there. And
Right.
then you panic, and then you go round and round and round and round and round. So I can totally see how a lot of pain is learned, and this is where I get existential, because if I'm
Yeah.
worried in the gym, oh my god, it's going to get injured. I'm going to get injured again. It's going to get injured again. Then I'm kind of creating that. Or B, that's not happening and I'm just in stress and I'm like, is this real or am I making this up? Can I lift more or
Yeah.
not? Like that is so fascinating, Alec.
It really is. And going back to this idea that all pain is real, like whether or not you are conditioning it, like from a structural injury, or whether it's this belief that is driving the pain, it is measurable. It is physiological, right? It is the it is not something that is kind of like mystical woo woo, like in your mind. Like it is real intense physical pain. And what's crazy is that actually some of the doctors who work in this field will testify to this. Some of the most intense symptoms that they've ever seen patients have are ones that are generated by the brain. So, for example, um, epileptic seizures. If you talk to a neurologist who works with seizures, they'll tell you that roughly 40 to 60% of people who come into a seizure clinic will have seizures that look almost exactly like an epileptic seizure. However, if you did a brain scan, it would look completely normal. It is essentially a pseudo seizure, something that is generated by the brain. And yet it is an incredibly intense experience. And it's not happening consciously either. That's the thing. It's this unconscious or subconscious process that is happening in order to signify that there is some sort of danger, right? This goes back
Mm.
to fight, flight, freeze response. So when it comes to pain, generally it can be an amped up nervous system, right? There is some sort of fear there. And there's pain to say, Kieran, back off, you're going to injure yourself, because that's the belief that you've essentially
Mhm.
instilled. The other end of the spectrum, though, can be something like chronic fatigue. And I've worked with clients with chronic fatigue. And it's essentially a shutdown response of, we can't actually handle this. And so there's nothing that we can physically do to get better. So the brain says, right, to get out of the situation, we're going to play possum. We're going to play dead. So in the same way, it's the brain. It is incredible what the brain can do on so many different levels.
Hmm. I have a story I share with my clients, which I think you'll find interesting on this, which is when I was a kid, I was play fighting with my friend, Doug. Shout out to Doug if you actually listen to this podcast. Um, and he was on top of me and he's heavier than me. And I was always the small, skinny runt of the group. It was always me. And
You and me both.
I'm trying to I'm trying to push him off me, right? So he's pinned me. I'm on my back. He's like pinned on top of me, and he's slapping me in the face. I'm getting really annoyed. So I do like hip thrust to like lift him off of me, and I did it, and we were both shocked. He looked at me, and I looked at him. What the? How have you done that? And then lower left back, muscular.
Mm,
It went. And there's a real problem. And my boxing coach was furious with me at the time. He was like, "What are you doing?" And we were getting loads of like we weren't educated on this sport. Like this wasn't a thing when I was fighting. So they just sent me to a masseuse and be like, that should get him. That's fine. That's all we got. And it kept going and coming and going and coming and going, and even to this day. But when we noticed the pattern was whenever I'd have a big fight, air quotes, my back would go, my
mm.
lower left back would go every single
Same
time.
place where,
Same place, same spot, like
yeah,
at like 10 days out. And then I remember one day I was complaining about it, and one of my mentors said to me, my boxing sponsors said, Kieran, that's how we know you're getting up for a big fight. Don't worry about it. I went, what do you mean? Every single big fight you have, you get lower back pain. And then I was like, I kind of ignored it. And then I spoke to Hazel Gale, former kickboxing world champion and mental performance coach and therapist. And I asked her about it. And she goes, yeah, that's just your brain telling you that you're getting ready for a big fight. So I changed my relationship with, instead of it being, I'm in pain, I'm going to break my back in my fight, it was,
yeah,
oh, I'm getting ready for a big fight. And then fast forward 7, 8 years later, I'm speaking on stage at the Burj Khalifa here in Dubai, and it was right back when COVID was kind of on and off again.
Hmm.
This would have been 2020, and I remember I haven't spoken on stage for like, with people, A, and B, on stage in like 2 years. I remember as I'm about to go on stage, my lower back went, and I just smiled. And I just
Mm.
smiled. And I went, that's a sign that I'm about to do something big. So, having first, I've rewired my brain in that sense.
Yeah.
When in nervous events when I'm speaking, when my lower back's going to go, and that's a sign that this is another level. Same thing happened to me when I went on the radio. So, like, I can see it how that was a learned response because my body doesn't want me to fight. Like
Right.
boxing is such an unnatural thing. Like Alec, you and me are going to have a fight in 6 weeks, and I'll see you there. That doesn't happen in the jungle. What happens in the jungle is you jump out in front of me, we get scared, we have a fight, and then it goes. So
Yeah.
I can totally see how a defense mechanism of, well, I don't want you fighting, so I'm just going to sort of, when you get really nervous, just going to let you know that that's there. So I can totally see how the stimulus reinforced over years then becomes chronic.
Yeah. I oh, that's a perfect example because it's something that, physiologically, your back hasn't changed, right?
Mm.
Why would it a few days before the fight, why would it start to hurt? And then a few days after the fight, it's fine, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the hallmarks of brain generated pain. We can get into kind of some other ways to spot it, but that's a perfect example. Um, and I agree everything that the people were telling you. It's like, yeah, this is you gearing up for a big fight. There's nothing wrong. What I work on with my clients is understanding the emotions behind why that would be happening. So going back to Dr. Sarno, the book that I mentioned, who pioneered this field, his whole thing was that repressed emotions are the cause of a lot of chronic pain, anger primarily, but other ones as well. Sadness or guilt or fear of embarrassment. And a way to think about it is essentially there's some sort of fear response. Like pain itself is a protector in the same way that your pain was trying to protect you from not fighting. My pain back in the day was trying to protect me from not racing. And if we can understand what it is trying to protect us from and really get to the emotions behind that, then this defense mechanism ceases to be a defense mechanism. You've pulled back the veil. So, for example, for me, when I started to realize that my identity had been built on achievement, that what I was really afraid of was not being good enough, being embarrassed, being like you, I was this small, skinny kid who like finally found something that I was good at athletically that I could, be head
Mhm.
and shoulders above other people with. And to have that taken away from me, that was really, really scary. And when I started to approach those feelings, that's when, that's when my pain started to go away. Um, and it's amazing what can happen. Like when we realize this, and it happens in day-to-day scenarios. Like, so I'll get shin splints from time to time, right? But not if
Mm.
I'm running. I will be sitting and I'll feel a fear response in my chest. Could be anything, could be athletic or
Mhm.
not. But then I'll feel that in my shins as well. And it's kind of my
Mm.
signal that, there's something I'm afraid of.
Oh,
And
nice.
in that moment, here's the thing that I think differentiates this work from a lot of other work that folks do. You can either say, oh, okay, it's just fear, I'm just going to push through this is fine, I'm going to ignore that, which is, I've done that before. There's a time and a place for that. Or you can actually go into that and be like, okay, what is this fear? Can I actually fully face this, fully face the weight of it, the sensation in my body that is fear, and confront this? And if you do that with love and compassion toward yourself, that's when things start to change. You start to realize, wait a minute, I'm not broken. Wait a minute, I am enough. And I can handle this. And
Mm.
you're essentially rewiring your brain. You're proving to yourself that you're safe, you're not in danger, either physically or psychologically.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. Can we go to the opposite end of the spectrum? So,
Hmm.
I taught myself to ignore pain. Naturally, when you're fighting, I question whether I have a series of issues now, even to this day,
Mm.
based on my ability to ignore pain. Because when I was fighting, you're constantly, well, like what I find fascinating about cycling is my understanding is apart from when you're gliding, like you guys are pretty much under chronic stress. Like you're chronic stress for hours, right? Whereas in
Yeah.
boxing, it's pretty quick. You're in there, you're using strategy, using your mind. It's explosive. Yeah, you get hit, but it's blunt trauma versus chronic trauma. The chronic pain really is just when you're actually training and putting a lactic acid on the muscles so everything breaks down, right?
Right.
But I trained myself to ignore pain. So when I was
Mm.
on the pads and my shoulders are burning, they're
Yeah.
absolutely burning. I ignore it. My lower back's going when I'm doing burpees.
Mm.
Ignore it. The key one for me is food. Like I very
Mm.
rarely experience hunger. Alec, like I don't get
Hmm.
hungry. And a couple of things are happening. Number one, I think I've been exploring this over the last 12 months is I've actually been more stressed than I realized. But because of how stressed I used to be when I was an athlete, I'm comparing that as my gauge of stress. I'm like, this is nothing compared to how I used to be, right? But this still could be technically in the red zone. So I think there's a stress response which is pushing down my hunger. But then another part was I learned to ignore hunger. And I learned to ignore pain. I used to ignore the hunger pangs. So when I'm hungry
Yeah.
now, it doesn't really affect me. So there's the opposite end of the spectrum of in certain scenarios. So if I'm in the gym, I'm actually a very anxious psychological lifter where I'm always in my head. My ADHD doesn't help because I get distracted and I
Mm.
struggle to lock into flow. And I'm always worried about hurting myself. Whereas if you put me in a boxing gym now, even though I'm retired, my ability to push through pain at a detrimental level, because I've trained
Yeah.
myself, like I know I should only do 3 rounds of light sparring today. 5 heavy rounds go in, and I push myself. I don't even think twice. So, what about the opposite end of the spectrum when you've conditioned yourself in certain scenarios where you should pull back, but you just
Yeah.
ignore it, and then you get sick or injured, which is something that I'm working on actively. Is how do I become
Mm.
less sick and how do I become less injured? So let's look at the
Yeah.
opposite end. Can you run me through can you educate me on
Yeah.
that?
It's a really interesting area, and there's an example of I forget the term, but there's a small number of people in the world who are born without the ability to feel pain.
Mhm.
Uh, Forget the medical term; it's not a large number of people. And what happens is generally they don't live very long because
Oh,
pain essentially is a protector. Pain exists to say, if, for example, if you put your hand on a hot stove, you will get pain before there is any tissue damage. And the reason
wow.
is because your brain is saying, "Hey, Kieran, this is not good." If you can't feel pain, it's the equivalent of just walking out onto a highway blind and thinking you're going to be safe, right?
Yeah,
And get hit by a car. So
gotcha.
on the extreme end of it, it's not about ignore. At least in my view, it's not about ignoring and kind of pushing through pain in the classical sense. It's about instead recognizing that this pain is not doesn't signify that anything is actually wrong with my body. And this comes with a deep appreciation of the idea how Herculean the body is. And I use that word with my clients. I use it intentionally. The body is Herculean. So the first step, I think, in any of this to have a foundation is understanding how structural abnormalities don't always cause pain, and pain is not representative of structural abnormalities all the time. So, for example, if I told you 40% of elite overhead athletes, so those in volleyball or
Mhm.
judo, for example, have a partial or full tear of their rotator cuff and no pain whatsoever.
That's
Or if I
fascinating.
told, yeah, 50% of NBA players, pro basketball players, have lesions on their knees, no pain. 2/3 of pro and collegiate hockey players have hip degeneration, no pain whatsoever. 80% of elite rock climbers, shoulder abnormalities, no pain. If I shared all that with you, and you get to a place of, wow, I can have all these things that show up on an MRI or a medical test, and they don't actually mean pain, that can create such a sense of safety within the body that whatever pain you do experience doesn't come with that same fear response. So
Mm.
I think it's a very subtle difference, but it's a huge one in that if you're going to the gym and you're lifting and you're saying, I'm just going to push through this, this is fine. but secretly, like, you have a really activated fear response, and you're like, maybe it's not fine. I'm just telling
Mhm.
myself these lies and hoping I believe them. I've definitely been there myself. That's very different from experiencing pain and knowing deep down in your bones that you are physically safe and that this is just an old conditioned response. And your job now is to stay in this place of I am safe, I'm not in danger, and to condition your brain in a new way. Does that make sense? It's a subtle thing, and it's hard to wrap your head around, I think.
If I'm being vulnerable for a minute, this might surprise a lot of the listeners on the podcast, but I actually have a feeling it's getting better. I've had to work really hard on it, like really hard the last few months. But after last year, I think I got sick 5 times, and I got injured 5 times, maybe 4 times. An injury, not like I'm in a wheelchair or anything like that, but enough. I think my rib cage, intercostal muscles twice on the same side from sparring, like not good. Lower back, right knee, and I have this internal psychologically. I believe my makeup in regards to coaching, business, life, it's like steel. Like you can
Mm,
throw anything at me in the business and coaching world, no problem. I can
mm,
handle it. I have this innate belief I can handle it and I will solve it. And it's unwavering faith really is the word. But when it comes to my body, when it comes to training, when you said, yeah, you're internal Hercules, I actually have the opposite, which
mm,
is I feel fragile and I feel delicate. And I have all these stories that I tell myself,
yeah.
like, um, you must have overcooked it when you were boxing and you were so starved and so overtrained and underrested. This is why you're getting sick and injured all the time. Or, because I've tried to beat myself up internally. Fucking shut up and get it done. Same thing, injured. I tried
Yeah.
pulling myself right back. Same thing, sick and injured. Like it was the challenge I've had, and I work pretty hard. Like I'm doing maybe 25 to 30 calls a week, on top of lots of thinking on top of that. So I'm burning up a lot of, sort of mental calories in the brain, but I don't have this. It's getting better. I've been doing loads of
Mm,
yoga and stretching, and I pulled my training right back, like right back. And I've had a
mm,
good spell so far. Touch wood that I haven't got sick or injured. But I don't have that internal belief that I'm a Hercules. I don't have
mm,
um, that backing and belief in my body that if I want to start sparring again, or if I
yeah.
want to start boxing again, or if I want to really take things up a notch that I can do it. And that is
Mm,
because whenever I push myself up, I either under recover and get injured, and then it's in my head. And then there's a load
mm,
of beliefs attached to if I can't train, my ADHD goes out the window, this goes out the window, this goes out the window, and it all falls apart.
yeah.
So I'm really fascinated because I'm at this place where if you look into my mind in relation to anything other than my physiological being, I am Hercules.
Yeah.
But when it comes to training, nutrition, recovery, and all of that, I feel the opposite. I feel like a
Fragility.
little, like yeah, just fragile, like like
Yeah.
like a clay pot where I'll be like, yeah, that's cool, but you drop that and oh my god, it's gonna
Yeah.
break. So, like, what do you do with that? How do you
Yeah.
work?
So let me ask, that sense of fragility, what's the belief behind that? Like, take us into a very, like, time and place, an example. Let's make it real.
Uh, well, the belief is I'm fragile, and
Hmm.
and I judge myself for it because I'm like, dude, you used to push through so much more pain. Dude, you used to be a full time athlete and now you can't. So there's still a bit of attachment
Mm,
to how I used to be. And my
yeah.
brain still identifies as that scrappy fighter that can push through. So there's a bit of judgment. There's a
Got it.
bit of, like, let's say I'm in the gym, right? And it might just be I don't like the gym and I need to take it out. Like that is also something else. My body's telling me the gym's not for you and you need to get out. So
Yeah.
as we're speaking aloud, it might be that. But I have found like sometimes when I'm in the gym, I let's say I'm about to try and push through some Bulgarian split squats, right? And I'm trying to push
Yeah.
through. My lower back starts to go, "Hi, man," and that's why I created a dialogue with it. It's like, "Oh, you're just
Yeah.
saying hey," but then it's like, "Well, hang on, this is getting worse and worse." And hang on, now you're not actually lifting as much as you were last week, and you're experiencing pain. You're going to injure yourself. So I back off. And
Mm,
then if I don't back off, I push myself and then I get a twinge and then I convince myself I'm injured for a few days. So then I back off all of my
mm,
other training. Thus, my body isn't building the resilience and it's not building
mm.
that consistency. And then I get even more delicate. So like that's the dance. The
Yeah.
belief is this real pain? Is this not pain? Can I do this? Can
Okay.
I not? And then I need to back right off because I can't handle this and it's gonna go. Or the opposite,
Okay.
which is I'm gonna push through, fuck you, and then does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Okay. It absolutely does. So there's a ton of energy being used to either like, do I push through this? Do I not?
Yeah.
And
All
it's,
the time.
uh,
All the time. Yeah.
and I really get that. I really get that because that's exactly how I felt toward running for so long. Like my body's not built to do this. I had this, so I resonate in the moment. So let me ask: in the moment when you are like, you're starting to feel the burn in your muscles, like, can I do another one? What is the fear and what is the threat behind not being able to do another one to you and your identity?
Oh, fuck yeah. Like, nice. Uh, I'm going to break is one belief. I'm going to break, or I'm going to get injured, thus I cannot train. And if I can't train, for me, my ADHD is like 99th percentile, both ADD and the hyperactivity. And whenever my training stops, I I suffer, man. Like
Yeah.
I really suffer. Like to the point where sometimes I'll be absolutely fucking floored. I'm staring at the ceiling. There's 100 mental tabs open, and I'm flicking between them all, and anxiousness and anger and frustrate. Like it's so when I don't train, my ADHD becomes so crippling. I
Yeah.
can't do anything. So I've just made the connection of if you push through this and you get hurt, you're not going to be able to train. And if you can't train, your ADHD is going to mean you're broken. That's essentially what's going on here.
So better to do 60% or 80% than to
Correct.
do a full 100 and risk it.
100%. Yeah.
So you hit the nail on the head. It's like your brain is trying to keep you safe because if you're not able to train, then everything is going to go off the rails.
Yeah.
And it
100.
and something that I see, I relate to this as well. There's a sense of I need to do XYZ in order to be enough. And maybe you use different words for that, but it's something that I see that is very common amongst athletes. I need to be able to train to be enough. I need to be able to do this. And it might be for like this internal, like everything's going to fall apart, or it might be for appearances. Like, you know, how can I how can I be doing the work that I'm doing and walking the walk and being Kieran if I am not able to do this, if
Mm.
complete this workout? So just a
Yeah.
few things to potentially consider.
It's less about the workout, I think. It's less about the workout. I think it's more I guess it's the avoidance of suffering. It's like, well, hang on, how worth is that extra rep versus potentially 2 weeks on the sidelines and not being able to train, given how much suffering I'll experience if I get injured? So always playing within myself, and I'm always like stuck. So I think there's a fear and avoidance of, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? And
Yeah.
for me, the perceived risk of pushing in the gym anyway. When I'm in boxing, I go
Yeah.
stupid. It's the opposite. But just as an example, like it's the fear of I'm just not going to be able to function, and then within that, it's well that will impact everything. It'll impact my ability to perform. It'll impact my peace, my joy, my calm,
Yeah.
my flow. Because it can really be that the ADHD can be that crippling. So I think it's such a
Mm-hmm.
play within yourself because that's so dangerous for you to potentially mess up as I'm speaking it aloud. And then, okay, how does this show up as not being good enough, right? Putting my therapist hat on myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at peace with I have my ADHD. I'm at peace with I have psychological and emotional wobbles, particularly when I'm injured or sick. When that happens, I'm very at peace with that, and I've spoken about that before with clients and publicly. But um, I think it's so debilitating for me it's so debilitating. It's quite scary. Like sometimes
Yeah.
I lose such touch with reality mentally when
Yeah.
when an ADHD. I haven't had any, touch wood, any ADHD attacks to that degree
Yeah.
probably for about 6 to 8 months, where I've been playing within myself a lot more and coming out of that shell. But I think it really is like, wow, that hurts so much, and it's so frustrating. If I
Yeah.
know I can avoid it, I'll do almost anything to avoid that. That's what it is, I think.
So, can you get a sense of that fear in your body right now?
Yeah, upper left ab, like
Upper left
upper
ab.
left, like the top left one, right up in there, and then right my like solar plexus, right up there.
Yeah. So that's where you feel the fear. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I think about the ADHD and all of that, like if you get injured or sick, that is going to ramp all of this up, and that means
Yeah.
you're going to be crippled by this. Yeah, that's
Okay.
right in there. Yeah, right in there.
Okay. Do you want to do a little exercise with me?
Yeah, let's roll. I'm in. Let's play.
Okay. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes.
Yeah.
And what I want you to do with ease, bring your focus to that left ab, that solar plexus, where you feel that fear.
I instantly go tight. My whole abdomen
Okay.
goes, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So just be aware of that and breathe into it, not trying to change anything, but the equivalent of moving toward it. Almost like if it's a punch, you're moving toward that punch as opposed to away from it.
Yeah, getting closer. I just get more and more tense.
Okay. That's perfectly fine. So observe it and kind of like clouds passing in the sky, just notice that tenseness. And as you do this, relax your shoulders, relax your face. And just tell yourself internally, if this is helpful, I'm safe. I'm not in danger. I can meet this fear.
It's interesting as I go towards the ab, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can calm it down. And then as soon as I think of the ADHD crippling, like the way it cripples me,
Yeah.
that is where a primal fear kicks in. A primal hijacking fear. And it's like I'm looking at it and it's like a monster, and it's like, yeah, you're not safe around me, buddy. It's that. And then as I kind of come back towards the ab, like it's almost like I can feel it, and like to my right, and as I come back towards my
Yeah.
ab, I feel safer. That's still scary, but it's like that's where the monster.
That's the real monster. Okay.
That's the real monster.
Yeah.
It's like here, yeah.
So I'll bring you out of this. That's really, really good awareness. Um, that technique is all about moving toward the fear as opposed to away from it. And what you just found there, which I think is brilliant, is it started with this fear, solar plexus, left ab, and then you found out what the real big fear is. Because essentially, what's happening in general is we have these personality traits, or we have kind of this disposition of way that we comport ourselves in the world, and that generally is kind of it can be a defense that is covering up some sensation that we don't want to feel. And when we get through those two layers, like that sensation that we really don't want to feel, we get to the stuff that is like, whoa, this is off limits. This is not something I want to experience. And that is where the real work is. So if you can, and there are techniques to do this, but if you can start to experience that in a small way, it's like taking a Coke can that's like shaken up. You just let out a little bit of air each time, and it's just very smooth, very gradual. That fear, that primal fear, will start to dissipate, but only if you start to move toward it and actually experience it, because that is the defense that is triggered when you are doing the workouts.
I
Does that make
essentially,
sense?
yeah, 100%. You essentially expose my shadow. There's some shadow work in there that
Bingo.
hasn't been processed, and that has been built up over time to a point where when I did it, I literally visualize a tall, aggressive, dark, black monster. I'm going to play around on ChatGPT and see if I can create something that looks like it. But it was like real dark and scary and really horrible, right? And I've done a lot of shadow work
Mm.
myself. I work with clients on shadow work. Um, so there's definitely an edge. There's
Yeah.
definitely an edge in there. And that's where I think if I can unlock that, I'll unlock a lot of physiological freedom and I'll probably win back a lot more energy and I'll probably be a lot more calm, collected, and robust. But that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like I tell you what, I'm gonna start bringing this to the gym, right? And every time I start like going into my head, because I often get stuck in my head, I'm just gonna visualize the monster sat in front of me, and I'm just gonna look him in the eyes, and I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
as I'm getting there. But be careful I don't start fighting and actually get injured. But I've just got to start hanging out with him a little bit more and bringing him along and befriending him and going, all right,
Bingo.
Mr. Monster, you're there'll be parts of you that are actually very positive, and there's probably some parts integration to go on there and understand. All right, buddy. Okay, what is your real intention here? And
Yeah.
it's always trying to keep you alive, trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you loved. Like that's what it always is. Uh,
Exactly. And if you can send that part, that scary monster, that compassion, that love, that's when things really start to change. And you know this, right? You talked about parts work, you talked about shadow work. Um, and that's when, like, if you bring it along for the ride, like that is what fundamentally can help you push past whatever block you have. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not a block because there's something physically wrong, right? It's it can be karaoke, it can be at the gym, it could be giving a presentation, whatever it is. But ultimately, it's not the situation, it's some sort of threat. And if you're able to work with that internal threat, the external changes too. So I'm curious to see, you'll have to keep me updated how you get on with that.
yeah, yeah. I'm quite creative and visual, so I can literally imagine. Like my body cuts off when I'm doing certain reps. Like my muscle just goes, nope. And my coach, when he's with me, can see it. He's like, "You've got more in the tank." I'm like, "I know, but
Yeah,
I'm pushing and it's not there." But it's actually the monster. The monster's probably putting his
right,
hand on the weight and going, "No, mate, the juice isn't worth the
right.
squeeze here." So I'm going to play with him and bring him in and observe him. And there'll be some people listening to going, "Wow, that's cool. I really resonate with that." Some are going to think I'm absolutely insane, and that's totally cool. Um, but yeah, exposure therapy is a powerful thing, and it's just
Hugely.
exposing yourself to that and having that internal dialogue and recognizing, because Custamato said fear is like fire. It can put man on the moon or it can burn the house down. It can cook your chops and keep you warm, or it can absolutely destroy life. And I took that
Mm,
and I adjusted that, and I think ambition is the same thing. Ambition is like fire, and learning how to manage your ambition, um, which is a pre ambition. Fear is kind of a precursor to ambition sometimes, but it's understanding that when you can manage that, it's actually okay. So I'm really grateful for that mirror that you've held and that blind spot you've shown me, because there's a monster that keeps rocking up to me when I'm in the gym, and then I can't figure out, is it the gym? And I just don't want to train, and that's why he's there. And he's trying to say, dude, you don't want to train at the gym. Get out, go play paddle, go get back to boxing. But whatever, I don't know.
yeah,
But he's definitely in there, and he needs some work, the little guy. So a big
yeah,
guy in my head. So thank you.
yeah, absolutely. And that's something to work with too. Is like, sometimes, for example, I resonate what you said earlier about these injuries and things that were coming up to prevent you from going into, like, boxing wasn't for you. In the same way, you know, my brain, my mind, whatever you want to call it, was trying to show me there was a better way than becoming a professional cyclist. There was other things that I was meant to do. And I think it's a really interesting point of inquiry of, like, is this something that I really want to do? Do I really want to go to the gym? Do I really want to go on this run, this ride, this workout? Or am I just telling myself that I have to? And so then it becomes like a,
Mm,
sometimes, and if you ask that question, you get to a place of, no, I don't really want to. Then it's like, okay, great. Then that symptom can go away once you stop doing the thing. Or it's like, no, I actually really do want to do this. And it becomes more fuel to actually, get through and push through and reach the goals that you have.
yeah, that's always the dance. Do I actually want this, or am I
100%.
just forcing myself through this? Like, do I?
Yeah.
Yeah, do I want out just because it's hard? and the egoic fighter inside me is like, nah, just push through. And when I'm boxing, it's easy. I can push through pain, no problem. And then it's only the days after I regret my decisions. But like when I'm in the gym, there's always this internal resistance. I'm fucking bored. I'm complicated. So then I'm always like, okay, is it you actually just don't want it? Is that what this
Yeah.
is? You just don't want this lifestyle, and you gotta let that go, or is it something else? But that's always the dance, and that's always the one with the shadow
Yeah.
monsters always there asking you questions like, maybe you don't want this, buddy. Maybe this isn't for you, or is it? You're just afraid of getting hurt. Yeah, I'm just wary of
And
time,
those,
mate. I understand.
yeah.
I want to check how long left have we got on your side.
Oh
Um,
man, I'm having a great time, so I'm good to keep going. There's so much more that I could share. Don't know how many listeners will
oh
go this long.
yeah, let's keep partying. I'm deeply enjoying this too. Um, Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's like, what is my body trying to tell me? Is my body trying to tell me I'm
Yeah.
fragile? Is my body trying to tell me I'm afraid? Or is my body just trying to tell me you just don't want this? Because like with boxing, I don't have a level of impulse control that I can not do without getting hurt or injured. Like if and in the boxing world, they train to smash you into the floor, and then I get injured, and then
Yeah.
the fear comes back. The monster comes back in. You're injured. The ADHD is going to come back, and it's going to cripple you, and it's going to. So like that's what this guy is walking around with, and I can see how much energy unconsciously that must be burning up, thus repeating the cycle of being tired and being
Yeah.
under recovered, and thus increasing my propensity for pain, which doesn't necessarily mean injury, which then triggers that cycle of going round and round, if I've understood that correctly.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you were to put a quick answer of like how long you've been doing that for, how long that conditioning's been there for, how long would you say?
Probably my whole, well, in relation, I think it's just attached itself to different things, right? So the pain when I was fighting was that monster. He's probably been there since boxing, to be honest, right? So that,
Yeah.
let's say I started when I was 12, I boxed for about 10 years. So yeah, probably started when I was about right when my first boxing coach died. He was like my hero,
Mhm.
my idol. He went from healthy, Martin Calvert. He went from healthy to 2 weeks in a hospital bed about to die, and I promised him I'd win him a national title, and I never did. I tried my hardest, but I put all of this pressure, and
Mm.
maybe there's a as I'm speaking aloud, maybe there's a trauma wrapped up in this, because then every time I perceive myself as injured, don't get me wrong, I hurt my back before he died, but um, if I'm injured, that means I can't win fights. If I can't win fights, that means I'm not going to be able to go to the nationals and win him the national
Yeah.
titles. If I can't go to the nationals, that means I can't go and win Olympic gold. And if I can't win Olympic gold, then that means I failed on my dream that I told everyone I'd do. So, like, thinking about it, it's probably been, decades, I guess, maybe.
Decades. Yeah. So that
Potentially, yeah.
conditioning, we talked about how within, a few months, even a few weeks, pain can go from structural to chronic. Like
Mhm.
you repeat those same neural pathways for decades. Of course it's going to be ingrained. The cool thing is though, when it comes to this work, like injury specifically, within 3 weeks. Now everybody's time frame is different, but I've seen remarkable recoveries within 3 weeks. People can go from being in immense pain with physical activities to being able to do things they never thought they'd do again. That was my case as well. When I started this treatment program, after 2 years of chronic pain, constant chronic back pain, within about 2 to 3 weeks, all of my pain that was in my lower back shifted into my mid back. And that's when I was
Mm,
like, I have it on the run, because if it's shifting like that, there's no way that this is a structural issue. And,
yeah.
you know, a little while later, it started to shift into other things. And I was essentially had this huge breakthrough. So just because it's been conditioned for decades, like I had a client who's, like I said, chronic pain for 30 years. And as soon as he questioned those stories that he was telling himself and started to believe that his body was Herculean, that there was nothing wrong with him, that it was just this emotional, internal, psychological fear, he was doing stuff that he never thought he would ever be able to do in his life again. So these
Yeah.
transformations can happen quickly.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I guess as I'm speaking aloud, I accidentally did some chronic pain work by accident when I was training to be a cognitive hypnotherapist. So there was a lady on the course, and we were using a timeline technique from NLP to kind
Mm-hmm.
of go into where a certain fear was born. And I asked her,
Yeah.
where do you feel that fear? And she said, well, my stomach, but also the back of my neck. And I said, okay, whereabouts? She's like, yeah, on like the right side. And I noticed her head was slightly tilted that way. And I said, have you always had this pain in your neck? She goes, pretty much, yeah, my whole life. Like it comes and goes, it flares up or whatever. But like it's always like a 1 out of 10 at least. And I was like, okay, interesting. So we do the timeline technique. She makes the breakthrough that she needs. And then a month later, she comes back. And I don't know, you just sat up a little bit more straight. And obviously, what we'd done around the fear had made a difference. But she goes, by the way, Kieran, um, you know that pain I've always had in my neck? Yeah, it's gone. I haven't changed anything. It's just not there. And then we asked the tutor, and you've everyone's read the book, The Body Keeps Score, right? But like
Mm.
it made perfect sense. And the content of the timeline session was she was getting told off as a child, and her father grabbed her by the neck, and it was like
Mm.
so that's
Yeah.
that's a high dopamine example because it's like an A
Yeah.
equals B equation. So it's nice, it's clean. You can get a pair of scissors and you cut it through the middle. But life and trauma isn't always as A equals B. But I can totally see
Yeah.
how the emotions and the limiting beliefs gets caught up, and when you can break through that, how the body could completely shift. Because I've seen this in more in the mental game of running a business or public speaking or coaching or all leadership and all those of my clients. I've seen them make those breakthroughs, and psychologically they show up completely different in 2, 3, 4 weeks from a big breakthrough session. Um, so I've seen it on the mental, and I have technically seen it in the physical. I guess I have overlooked that. For myself, I haven't
Yeah.
really explored that. And I guess because I haven't got one big injury, it's just like a series of little niggles that just
Yeah.
become this big monster that don't really exist. I guess it's like, well, it's not real. It's not a real injury, right? You haven't like torn your ACL, so you kind of just the monster's kind of like, yeah, don't worry about it. Like keep me here because I'm keeping you alive, so don't worry. Like you kind
Yeah.
of put it aside. So I can 100% see the link between trauma, the body, and how some of your clients could easily, with just a couple of conversations, everything could shift. I can see that for sure.
100%. 100%. The example, I love that one that you just shared, because sometimes it is cut and dry like that, where, oh, yeah, abuse, neck, spot on. You realize the emotion, you process all of that, it goes away. But imagine what most of us do. Like there's a chronic pain epidemic. 1.5 billion people have chronic pain. 75% of high performance athletes have some sort of ongoing chronic pain. That number is about 45% of the general population. 75% when it comes to athletes. Athletes are uniquely predisposed. And imagine what happens if she keeps treating that as physical. Oh, there's something wrong with my neck. Oh, it must be a disc problem. Oh, I need to be leery of when I'm turning my head or how I'm using my body. It starts to build on top of this emotional stuff. And so you have these stories plus the emotional stuff, and it leaves you trying so many different treatments that don't work, spending so much money on things when at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with her body, right? It's literally this emotional, psychological thing that's causing it. And so if you understand that, you get to the core of this, you save yourself a lot of time, energy, money, and heartache.
Oh, Alec, like you, I was in with different specialists like every week, osteopaths,
Yeah.
chiropractors, physios, MRI scans, like you name it. And some of it was blunt trauma, but I think I used to prolong my injuries. Like I don't know if you can
Mm.
see, but I'm actually missing my thumbnail. I had a boxing match where I hit this guy. It was for the home county title. Reese Bellotti, he'd been the national champion the last 2 years in a row. He was 23. It was my first adult fight. I was 18, just turned 18,
Wow.
and everyone said he was going to knock me out. He's a big puncher, right? I'm pretty sure he's a European champion in the pros. He's a professional now. And I remember I hit him with this punch. It was the best punch I've ever hit anyone with. His head went flying back, and I thought, I've knocked out the champ. I've knocked him out. And then he comes back down, and then he hit me twice, back twice as hard as I'd hit him, and I knew it was over. But that one punch I'd landed, it all landed on my thumb. Like the core impact was on that. So I like all the ligaments in around my thumb were really injured, and the
Mm,
thumbnail got embedded into my skin, and they had to cut it out, and it never grew back properly. So they had to
mm,
kill the root.
mm.
And hand injuries in boxing are so they're so difficult, right? Because the whole point of
I can
punching
imagine.
someone is you have your hand, right? So
Yeah,
every single day, about 10,000 times a day, I'd be going, is it still pain there? Yep. Is there still pain there? Yep. And I do this thing called, I don't know what the scientific term, but I call it just checking. Oh, I catch myself. You're checking again. You're checking again.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you get stuck in these little roots of like, am I really injured? Oh yeah, it's still there. I knew I'm still injured. I knew it. Oh, and then you get anxious again because it means you can't
mm,
fight or it means like whatever. So that habitual thinking, that habitual response and way of being, I reckon I prolonged injuries so long. So I was just going to all these specialists and like, oh, you name it, mate. They injections, bone taps, UV,
yeah,
ultrasound, red light therapy, you name it. Like you just put yourself through it because your expectation is, well, one of these things is just going to click and the pain will completely disappear and I'll be fine. And then it just moves around to another part. Oh, it's my back again. Oh, it's my rib
yeah,
cage again. Oh, like even my coach now, he's like, Kieran, there's always you get better, and there's always something that creeps back in, and you got to learn to condition yourself to be at peace with that. So it all
yeah.
this conversation is so illuminating. Like it all makes so much sense.
And what is behind that if not fear, right? So if pain, essentially, if you take nothing away from this, take away the idea that pain is a protector. Pain is a protector. It's not necessarily representative of injury. And if you keep testing yourself and there's this fear of, oh, am I okay? Am I not okay?
Mm,
You're focusing on it, you're fixated on it, you trying to fight it, you get frustrated with it. These are the F's of chronic pain, by the
mm,
way. If you have that, it's just going to create more fear, which then creates more pain, which creates more fear.
mm.
And you just get into this cycle. I remember when I was doing the same exact thing, I had a knee injury back in high school when I was racing. And I would, anytime I'd use the bathroom, I'd like put the toilet seat down and then I would put my foot on top of the toilet seat. And so it's covered. And I would like put weight on my knee because do I have pain there? Do I not? I would
Mm.
do that for months
Yeah,
until I
yeah, I know this
realized,
so
wait a
well.
minute, this is not
Yeah.
helping. This is not helping.
God, yeah. And like I know as an OCD tendency of like just checking, like is it okay? And then when it doesn't hurt, you're like, yes, I'm healed. And then like you check again 30 minutes later, and it's like, I'm back to square one. And you just
Yeah,
create this like inner turmoil. It's funny because I
absolutely.
talk about a lot about suffering in my work and your ability to suffer, and through suffering there's freedom. And when you can learn to suffer and surrender to suffering, not cling to it and not let it mean anything. And I've calloused my mind in the business and coaching world where my ability to suffer, my propensity to suffer, and even in areas of my personal life it's very fluid and very like water. Whereas when
Mm,
it comes to my training and my personal management, like it's like the opposite. But I think I've unconsciously made a I've distinguished between pain and suffering, which are I guess the same thing, except one is a physiological and psychological response to a stimulus, either in the body or outside of the body. Um, Whereas suffering is a more existential, because you're going to suffer whether you like it or not. Where even if you have the best partner in the world, the best job in the world, there'll be suffering. Like you don't get a
yeah.
choice. So it's like my ability to suffer uh, in the things that a lot of people find hard. I'm quite chill with, but just going to the gym and like staying like that propensity to suffer, I'm still clinging. And I can imagine there's loads of people there'll be some people on this listening to this podcast that are like, I'm robust and I'm rigid and this is not me. That's fine, but
Mm,
your clients will be like this. You'll have many clients like this. When you're wondering, how am I struggling to get results with certain clients? Why can't they break through? Ask them, like, do you believe your body's robust? Do you believe, or are you always worried? For clients that are always complaining, instead of going, oh, they're just crybabies and they're just weak and they're just complaining and making excuses. Well, maybe there's something psychologically going on
yeah.
underneath the surface, and maybe getting on a phone call or a meeting with them to kind of discuss where that's coming from and bring up that awareness, because you know the mind is responsible for everything that we experience in this reality. Thus, it makes sense to invest in it and train it and understand it, and then recognize how that shows up. So, yeah, that's
100%.
been so fascinating. Understanding. Ah, that all makes
Can I
sense.
share Can I share an example,
Yeah.
real world example of that? Not of me, but of somebody recently, actually, in the NBA player Michael Porter Jr., who plays for the Denver Nuggets. He has a max contract, so he's literally highest paid as you can get in the NBA. He was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease in 10th grade, I believe. At the time, he was a number one ranked basketball prospect in the world, and he went through a period of within 3 years. He had 5 years. He had 3 back surgeries, and he's 25 years old. After his most recent one, he was like, "Something has to change, or else my career is going to be over." And what he did is he actually read Dr. Sarno's book. He reached out to a therapist in this field and started to work with her. And he started to connect, all these emotions, all the to his success in basketball, to being loved and being enough, and started to process some of this deeper stuff and believe that his body wasn't broken. And for the first time in his career, he played a full NBA season this year. The Nuggets beat LeBron James's Lakers in the first round of the playoffs, and LeBron literally said, "Michael Porter Jr. is the one who kicked our ass." So I share that because there's a real world pro NBA player example of this. And it shows how, even if you're one of those people that you just described, Karen, of, kind of hard steel, emotions go away. Like somebody like that in the NBA who is in a very much macho, hard fought culture, if he can go inward and do this work, other people can as well. If the best treatments in the world have failed to help him, and this stuff, which is, doesn't require medical intervention, if that does, like, what does that say about the potential for people to reach their dreams, to be pain free, to be healthy again, to do the things that they love without worry? It's incredible.
It makes you think, like with Western medicine, like how it's changed. It's like overnight we went through learned wisdom, whether that's I don't know the ins and outs of spiritual healing, right? But there was a lot of spiritual healing that used to go on. There was a lot of pastes made out of like local plants that from where you are from, not like we're all an international species now. Like my mum's from Spain, my dad's heritage is from Ireland, so
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up in England. So like the gene pool is constantly being messed around. But back then, hundreds and thousands of years ago, it was like this berry is in my environment and I am here. Thus, I believe the ability for them to digest that stuff would be much better. But like 200 years ago, maybe 300 years ago, modern medicine went, right, we're doing it this way now. Pills, this is the way. And we just kind of threw away a lot of that. But I wonder, was a lot, and don't get me wrong, it's not a black or white equation. And
Yeah.
that modern medicine has changed a lot of lives and eradicated a lot of disease and viruses and whatever. But I do wonder if we threw away a lot of innate wisdom, and actually if a lot of that the stuff that we had before was actually psychological. Like there was psychological therapies or conversation or even just belief. I remember being told, you might have heard this. Did you hear about the tumor story, and the placebo effect of the tumor story?
There's one that I know of. It might be the same. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So there was, the story goes like this. There's a guy, he got diagnosed with cancer, got these big tumors, and a lot of the therapies and a lot of the interventions they had at the time didn't work. And it's getting to the point where it's like, look, we can't help you. And then one week they say to the guy, "Hey, we've got this real experimental drug. Like, do you want to try it? It's very new, it's cutting edge, and it's been game changing for many people. Do you want to give it a go?" He said, "Yeah, okay." Um, but they were doing a double blind experiment, so they didn't know. Like the doctor didn't know, and he didn't know whether or not he was actually getting the real thing or not. But he believed it. He believed he was getting the actual drug. They didn't tell
Mm-hmm.
him that he wasn't. He was potentially not. He believed it, and his tumors started to shrink. And then when they told him, "Oh, sorry, it was just placebo," they came back. So it goes to show, like the power of the mind
Yeah.
it's there. And have we just, as a society, and obviously it's a big business, right? The medical industry is a big business. Have we potentially commercialized health and as a result kind of forgotten and pushed out a lot of the psychological side? Because let's say somebody goes to see a therapist for a month and then they feel better and they're much on a different league and level. You can't profit from that. Like, you know what I mean? Like that you can't.
100%.
If you put someone on drugs for like 12 months, that's like a much more. They look at patients in the US, as I understand, and here in Dubai too. Patients are basically customers, not patients, and that's kind of what I wonder
100%.
if there's an element of that going on too.
I have two things to add to that. 'Cause I'd heard that story as well, and it's the idea is that we think of the placebo effect, and it's really this external thing is changing us. Like, no, our belief in it is actually creating a physiological change in our body, and medicine didn't used to be so just body focused. It's funny that this happened with Rene Descartes, who during his time, this is a few hundred years ago, there was this split of the mind and the body are separate. The body is going to be within the realm of science, and the mind is going to be left to the church, and that's essentially what started this. And it has led to the scientific method. It's led to X-rays, MRIs, and vaccines, things that have benefited so many people, undoubtedly. However, there has been a complete disregard for the fact that your mental state can influence your physiology, the mind-body connection, right? It's something we all innately know. If you go out and give a presentation and you get butterflies in your stomach because you're nervous, there's a physical change. If you drink alcohol, for example, you ingest a substance, it changes your mind. Like, change the body, change the mind. It works both ways. But, doctors aren't taught this in medical school. Heck, they spend on average, about 8 to 12 hours learning about chronic pain alone in medical school. And there is so much research that talks about the impact on health of things like childhood trauma, of stress, of emotions. There's a mountain and mountain of research. This is not stuff that is new or woo-woo. It's all out there. How if you experience childhood trauma, you are at more risk for obesity, for dying an early death, for all sorts of negative health outcomes, cancer, etc. And so it really is coming back, I think, what you mentioned, Karen, to this wisdom of not seeing things as separate, but really understanding that it's all holistic. It's all connected, mind and body.
Like, and you can see that where we section off in very specific areas. So like you've got an ear, nose and throat doctor, and then you've got like, a neurologist. So then that's a completely different system. And it's almost like we've created modules of human beings as if they're robots, and we create these little modules. Is that right? You're in charge of this module, and don't get me wrong, you need a level of specialism. But
right.
I would imagine if they, surely there must be a better way, right? Surely there must be a better way of doing it. But if we zoom out, like a lot of suffering, and I work with a lot of my clients on how to suffer more effectively in order to drive performance. It's in the mind, and it's learning to surrender to your suffering, letting go, and stop clinging. And as you stop clinging, you stop getting stressed, and as you stop getting stressed, then everything else can start to breathe. Like a lot of my clients, I don't touch their businesses, and I don't touch their their physiological health. But often I see their businesses blow up and their physiological health get a lot better just because they're mentally more sound, and they're not only are they more robust, but they're also more like water. So they're clinging to less stuff.
Yeah.
So it shows that there's so much to explore, but often it's the fear of going in those doors. Like even me just discussing that shadow monster that came up, like that's not comfortable. A lot of people will make assumptions about me, like, oh, he's mentally solid, like nothing bothers him. No, like I can have that at work, and then when I'm in the gym or when I'm training, I can still feel vulnerable and fragile, and that's something that you got to work on. It's having the strength to go into those places and go, well, that doesn't feel right, or trying to put up a perfect image to the world of I'm fine. Men are professionals at that, but actually true courage is the ability to go into the shadow, into the darkness, and look it in the eye and realize, you're not going to kill me. My perception is you're not going to kill me, but you're not going to kill me. And then building that internal relationship.
And what you just described is completely opposite to everything that we are conditioned to believe, right? We want quick fixes. We want a pill, a
The
procedure, or a
magic
practitioner
pill.
to just
Give me the
fix
magic
us,
pill,
right?
Alec. Give me.
This is not the magic pill. Essentially,
Oh,
this is me saying, magic is possible. And people will say, like, I've had multiple clients who said, Alec, this is a miracle. And what's happening is not something that I am doing. It's they are essentially becoming their own inner light. They're becoming their own lighthouse of recognizing they're not broken. There's nothing wrong with their body. They have the capacity to do this hard work, to meet those uncomfortable places that you just mentioned. And when they do that, their lives transform. And it is, the opposite to saying, here, take this pill twice a day for 4 weeks and you're going to get better. And that's why I think it's, for a while this stuff didn't catch on, and now you see it really starting to enter the mainstream of people realizing, wait a minute, I need to do this inner work, because just changing my external, relying on somebody else's power, relying on somebody else to fix me, like, no, it's not the way.
there's an African proverb which is, if you conquer the enemy within, the enemy outside can do no harm. Now, when you look at it in a literal sense, that's actually not true. A man with a sword can chop your arm off. But if you look at this in a more of a psychological sense of, once I stop fighting with myself, it doesn't really matter what anyone else says. It doesn't really matter what else happens. And yeah, things might be hard and difficult, but I can handle it. But it's often the enemy within, that inner critic, and that dark side of you that you're trying to ignore or push away, and that that's where freedom is. It's not in, ah this is gonna change here, and this is gonna change here, and whatever. So yeah,
Bingo.
Alec, I've deeply loved this conversation, and I know there'll be a lot of people listening to this that I think are going to really benefit from this, from what you do. So, what options have you got for people that are like, whatever Alec does, I'm in. I want to learn. How
Yeah,
does it work, and how do I get involved?
absolutely. So if you are completely new to the idea of brain generated symptoms, there's a whole world for you to explore. I'm excited for you. I would check out painfreecomeback.com. And there we have a whole host of resources, free resources for you to get your hands dirty with this. There's a quiz that we have for somebody if you are experiencing chronic symptoms, pain or chronic fatigue, migraines, etc. We have a quiz that within 1 to 2 minutes you can understand whether there is a neuroplastic, i.e., brain generated component to your pain, and understand that. We have put together a mini ebook that goes more into this work that you can access as well. It's called our Kickstart ebook. We also run a free workshop, free 60-minute Zoom workshop every few weeks. You can sign up for it at painfreecomeback.com. We go really deep into this work. It's specifically for athletes. And I also do one-to-one coaching as well with people. And it's something that really lights me up, because I see the transformations that people are able to achieve. Whether it's working with a triathlete who had pain all over his body, who gets back to performing at a higher level as a result. I've worked with people who've had knee surgeries, hip replacements, who are back doing activities they never dreamed of before. And we go really deep in ways that some other traditional realms don't. So that is available as well on my personal website, aleckassin.com. And you can reach out to me, can have a conversation about that. But a lot of different ways to help people. And I really enjoy working with athletes. It's my niche. I think there's a beauty to it, not just of being able to be pain-free, but also achieve higher athletic performance as a result of this work. So
Cool. Well, guys, if you found this podcast helpful, please share it to your stories. Please check out Alec's stuff. He's just got a heart of gold, and he really wants to help people in this space. Whether you're an athlete yourself or you coach athletes, Alec is your man. Go and check him out. Alec, mate, I deeply appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Thanks, Kieran. This is awesome. Appreciate it.